Welcome to Insight Marketing Success, the podcast where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience, from vision to execution.
Hi, Frank. Welcome to IMS, Insight Marketing Success.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Frank, I had the opportunity to meet with you before, but for our audience, tell us who you are.
Sure. I'm Frank Sondors. I was born in a very tiny country called Latvia. Spent over a decade in software and specifically sales. And my last gig prior to launching a company called Salesforge, I led a sales team of about 50 people as a former VP sales. And yeah, right now I'm running a company called Salesforge, or sometimes also known as The Forge, with 7 different products where we scaled in the first year from $0 to $3 million in AR. So yeah.
Wow. Nice. Congratulations. Tell us about your education. What kind of education did you get to do that?
Sure. I think there's no education in sales, but I think the closest thing that there is actually political science. So I finished my bachelor's in international relations and also in international security. So it was essentially learning on how to influence masses, or what I would describe, one-to-many kind of selling. Whereas, during my career, I used to do predominantly one-to-one selling. So so my background kind of degree is in politics. I always thought I'm gonna work for NATO or the European Commission or something like that. But then I realized that the level of bureaucracy was just killing me. And that's where I had sort of a 180-degree sort of turn and started my career at Google and then kind of progressed from there on. So yeah.
So was your education in Latvia or was it in the Western?
No, in the UK. I studied in a college there, and then I moved over to study at the University of Southampton. This was where I did my bachelor's, and then I went over to study at University of Bristol, my master's degree. So yeah.
Okay, wonderful, amazing. All right, so obviously you went from 0 to 3 million and so forth. So what is the biggest marketing accomplishment that you faced, and how did you solve it? How did you get from that to to that nice number?
I mean, that's probably, my current experience, scaling from 0 to 3 million. I think that's the biggest accomplishment. Considering the fact that, we scaled to $2 million in ARR in particular, with no people in go-to-market whatsoever. So no people in marketing, no people in sales, no people in customer success. So it was just purely, co-founders scaling with a few people in support and a few engineers initially. And I would say, a lot of that comes down to, there's a lot of things that we did generally as a business, but it comes down to, I would say, founder-led sales, or, being essentially present with your customers, whatever they are, whether that's on LinkedIn, Facebook groups, and other channels. And leveraging my own domain expertise to build a software that ultimately for my former self. So for other heads of sales or outbound agencies right now, which is for whom we're building right now. And that has resonated with the market from very early on. And I still remember that moment where, even before shipping a single line of code, we had 4 paying customers already that wanted the software. So that is, I think, the best sort of validation in the market that, what you're building is not just in your head, but it's also something that people want. And and you can continue being always out there, on social media, so every single day you're posting about something, so, and you're sharing typically your learnings as a founder, or you're sharing naturally the problems that you're solving for your customers and a bunch of other things, right? So to be always top of mind. And for me, I call that sort of LinkedIn feed domination, really. So you're dominating the feed and you're always being there, you're always present, people don't know who you are. And as a result, when you do the outreach to them, whether you're going to send a cold email, or you are sending, a LinkedIn message or calling them up, it's not anymore that cold because you have warmed up the audience, for quite some time. And that's why we're able to scale quite effectively, because we're always doing, warming the audience and always reaching out to people out in the market. So yeah.
Okay. So obviously you have done some things right. I'm pretty sure there were some, let's call it mistakes for now, which I usually say to my people, to anybody, it's not a mistake if you are able to get information that you gain experience, right? Mm-hmm. So tell us about any mistakes that you encountered in the process and what did you learn from them?
So there's always plenty of mistakes. I remember back in my days at Google that, you typically used to say, hey, if you were looking to have a winning test, then out of 10 tests that you would run as a business owner or just generally as a business, only 1 and 2 out of 10 tests would actually win. So you need to run a lot of tests. So we're always, from very much early on, we're running a lot of tests to try to figure out what works, what doesn't. And yes, a lot of tests have failed. And I think the biggest, what's called a flop, but we had a little bet on it, is actually doubling down on TikTok. So we thought that, back in the days, TikTok was just getting the momentum sort of, 3 years ago. We thought, let's just, increase our presence on TikTok, because there are definitely people that are on TikTok. All we had to do is get, a bunch of, videos out there, dancing videos and stuff like that, and see whether that will resonate with the audience. But then we ran that experiment for like 6 months, and we generated maybe only 1 lead in total over the span of 6 months. So we decided to kill the whole project. However, the person that was doing the videos for us, we actually made him our head of YouTube. So, there's something that we learned, which is, hey, let's just forget about TikTok. However, we have this sort of asset, this individual who is really great on videos. How about he would do a bunch of YouTube videos right now? So right now, today, we produce anywhere between 20 to 30 YouTube videos on a monthly basis. And YouTube right now is our top 3 most converting channel out of all channels that we have, according to Google Analytics.
Well, YouTube is the second largest engine out there of searches, so that's wonderful. If you're able to take advantage of Google and then, of course, YouTube, so that's great. All right, how do you approach storytelling in your brand communications? Obviously, you use video, but what else?
Yeah, so we use video naturally. I mean, like one thing that I said, so I'm building the software for my former self, right? So the story is that the former head of sales that used to run a sales team of 50 had this sort of big nightmare from a kind of efficiency standpoint, that the only way to scale up a company, generate more pipeline, more revenue, was to hire more people, and that was not very sustainable. Kind of, it's kind of reciting my own story, my own pain that I had as a former VP sales, and then building a new piece of software, for my former self, right? So for the other heads of sales, to help companies to become leaner and meaner. So today, my sales team of 5 produces more output than my sales team of 50 back in the days. So this is the story that you tell on LinkedIn, through form of video, posts. So we generate a lot of content in that. We also do a lot of content. So I was, because I have a lot of experience in the field, having done sales for over 10 years, naturally, you can have this sort of authentic voice in the space. You've been in sales for a long time, then you became a founder, you're building sales technology, you're building it with a thought process of, generating output with the lowest possible input, which means fewest number of bodies. And that resonates with the audience. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing, writing a post, doing a video, being on YouTube, LinkedIn, X, being on a stage offline. Because it's very simple what startup kind of do. Like, I try to simplify it as much as I can. There's only 2 things that the startup has to do. One is to ship something great, a great piece of software or great piece of whatever product or service. And the second one is to sell it or distribute it. And I think what people typically struggle the most with actually is the distribution piece. How do you scale up your sales, but with the least possible input, whether that's, from a standpoint of Google Ads, or a standpoint of fewest number of bodies. But if you look at your P&L, what costs you the most is typically labor, right? So this is what we're trying to sort of cut down on. That's sort of what we call the fat. We're trying to cut down on that. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. What is the biggest trend you see today in marketing?
The biggest trend, not just in marketing, but I think generally overall in the economy, I would say, is implementation of agentic systems together with human processes. So let's say you're doing a process right now, and slowly but surely, we're seeing agents sort of creeping up, let's go that way, where you're blending essentially your process with agents. And that can be done through multiple different ways. Sort of one of them is you're sort of typically buying an agent out there, which is an off-the-shelf solution. You're plugging that into your team and your process, and you're trying to kill repetitive tasks. Or you're implementing custom workflows through softwares like Zapier, N8N, Make.com, etc. And you're building custom workflows to your business. And also, this is how you would reduce the number of repetitive tasks. So we have currently about 300 plus N8N workflows built out to kill the repetitive things that we would have to do in the business manually as a human. And that helps us to minimize the pressure to hire more people. So, yeah.
Wow, amazing. Very good. So tell us who will be the perfect profile or customer for Salesforge technology.
So these will be businesses that have at least 3,000 other businesses to reach out and talk about the pain that they're solving and the product that they have on offer. So that means you have to have a relatively large TAM, so total addressable market, to go out with. And this is where we solve that pain. So typically, when you have a too big of a TAM, you think about hiring more people to address every single business in your TAM. But what our software allows us to do is to scale up your activity without the necessity to hire more people. So we say typically the threshold is like at least 3,000 businesses, and you're looking to reach out to these businesses through means of cold emailing them or sending them a LinkedIn message. So either or, it could be also both actually, where we typically see really great response rates. So typically somewhere between 10 to 30%, somewhere in that range, if you're doing everything kind of by the book. So we have a lot of sort of frameworks that can be implemented. And yeah, we as a business today, using our own software, generate somewhere between 100 to 150 meetings on a monthly basis. So yeah.
Okay. And this is B2B, right?
Yes, B2B only, correct.
B2B sales, very good. All right, so I want to learn more about Frank Sondors, okay? So I'm going to put you in certain situations. Let's imagine that you go to a restaurant and you are in one of those booths where you cannot see who's behind you, but you hear a familiar voice. And there are three friends talking about you. What would you like them to say about you? What are the things that you would like to hear from your best friends?
So it's the typical things that even my manager would say. I think my older, gigs is Frank is typically the machine, the guy that just never stops. That's the type of person I am. I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, I start working, and I finish, at midnight. That's one. The second one is I'm a type of person that doesn't sugarcoat things. I say as it is. I'm very frank, essentially, in that sense. And then the other one typically that friends would tell me is Frank is an outlier typically in every team setup. And that's because through sort of this competitive element and having been in sales for such a long time, typically, I strive for the greatness, best possible results to be achieved, as an individual salesperson and managing a team, now as a company, scaling it up. So we are typically known, I'm typically known, and as a result, the company is typically known then being an outlier. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, at times, and I'm an entrepreneur myself, things can get overwhelming, either for business or for life. How do you stay grounded when things get overwhelming?
I think the best thing that I found for myself is just try and kind of do things that puts your mind sort of in the right place, kind of. That's probably the way I would put this. And so for me personally, I listen to a lot of music. So when I do any work, even though I'm under stress and I have like hundreds of things that I have to do while I'm here with you, but still back in my head is I'm listening to music and I'm just cracking through work essentially. And I'm just trying to achieve as much as I feasibly can as a human, I guess. And that's what keeps me going. And yes, you need these sort of, let's call it stimulus, that keeps you going as a person. And I typically say, it's either stimulus or what I typically say, it's a dopamine hit. What gives you the dopamine to keep on going, where even though you have a lot to do and you're super busy as a founder, but what gives you that energy so you don't feel super drained by the end of it, but you still have energy at midnight to keep on going. So for me, that's talking to customers, listening to music. And yes, if I have to switch off, I have to, play sometimes. I don't know, it's some of the things that you used to do as a child, maybe. So for me, that's video games. I would just go play some video games for a bit, and then I gotta go back in. But essentially, you need to know how to keep yourself sort of energized and kind of self-manipulate kind of your brain to be in the right headspace every single day, right? So, and I think it's very tough for any co-founder because you need to know yourself really well. What drives you, what drains you, your motivation levels, like all of that. And the more you know yourself, the better you are in control of yourself and your emotions and things around you, etc. The more you're in charge, sort of, and you'll be able to sort of, you gotta get, guide yourself into the right place, kind of, into the future. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Very good. Video games. All right. Obviously, you have experience now. You have created a nice size company. You have recurring business and growing. Let's go back in time when you first graduated from college in the UK. And if you could go to yourself and whisper something in your ear, what would you say to yourself?
I think one thing, this is particularly common for salespeople and engineers, I would say, especially people that are in high-paying roles in companies that typically don't tend to leave their jobs. Like, as in, they're very comfortable, with what you're doing, and you're not, in the mindset of wanting to create your business. Something has to push you, and it's because I never thought to myself, why should I create a startup? I'm very good at what I do. I can sell the software for different CEOs out there, make a lot of money, and be very happy and play video games, right? So, but I think, doing something, starting your own company, starting your own startup, whatever that is, and being poor on day zero, is a zone where I'm not very comfortable in. And this is the stuff that I do in my life. I try to do the next thing in my life, the next chapter, where I feel I'm not comfortable. So it pushes me to learn stuff, And so this could have been, straight out of the university, straight out of college, I could have just jumped right into starting a company, but that's not something that they teach you, just generally to do. At college, nobody would tell you, "Hey, go and start a startup." It's not a typical path to take, but it's something I would whisper myself. Hey, wait a minute, maybe forget about that graduate job or forget about working at Google. How about you just go and start a company? And that's not something that I would really ever even think back of my head, to do that. But it's a fantastic moment to start if you have because this is where you have the highest motivation levels to change the world, just straight out of university. And typically, you'd say the motivation kind of dips, over time when you're in your 30s and 40s. And this is also why a lot of VCs, a lot of investors like to invest into what's called the younger kids that are in their 20s. So you can see a lot of YC-backed companies. Just look at the age of those founders. They're very, very young, a lot of them. And that's because these people are very, very hungry. They want to change the world, right? And you need those levels of motivation, those levels of hunger to succeed. And I had those motivations back then, but I would just not think to put kind of my energy and my time into building a company, that early on. But this could be sort of an alternative kind of path that I, kind of would see for myself.
So what you would whisper is, don't be afraid to start your own company.
Yes. It just, nobody would push you to do that. Not even your parents, to be honest. I think that is the bit of a dilemma. I think, it's very different in the US, but if you're outside the US, it's just not very typical for somebody to whisper in your ear and say, hey, do you want to start a business? Maybe it's a really great idea, but I think today it's getting sort of more and more mainstream with everything that's available with large language models and stuff like that. It's just easier to build a piece of software and go out there and sell that. So
yeah. Frank, thank you very much for being part of IMS. I look forward to getting to know you better, and I appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Insight Marketing Success, where marketing knowledge meets real-world experience from vision to execution.